Welcome to a Drop Tent Media production.
Welcome to the Lone Stakers Podcast. Hi, I'm Albert Davis, and I'm a solo staker on the Ethereum blockchain.
And I'm Tommy Harold, and I'm a solo staker.
Both Tommy and I are crypto enthusiasts, navigating the world of Ethereum solo staking. We're not experts, but we're on a journey to learn more. So join us as we explore, learn, and stake our claim in the Ethereum network.
Welcome to another episode of the Lone Stakers podcast with me, Tommy Harold, and Albert Davis. This is a podcast where we take a shallow dive into the world of cryptocurrencies, blockchain, Ethereum, and most importantly, solo staking. Today, we have the honor of having a special guest, our very first guest, and he is Jaydeep Korde. So welcome, Jaydeep. We're going to have hopefully a great conversation today, and we're gonna dig in some exciting topics.
Thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
Very, very good. And I'm glad you mentioned that we're solo stakers. You know, the lone stakers are the solo stakers. And I would say chief amongst the solo stakers would be Jaydeep. I was thinking about this earlier today. No, I sometimes play around with language and words, but with decentralization, it's like Jaydeep is like a champion of decentralization. So yeah, it's really really great for us to have you as a guest today. Really important because you really do help people run nodes in the pure way and decentralized way. So yeah, Jaydeep, how did it start? How did this all begin for you? A little bit about the journey, your crypto journey.
Yeah, I think my crypto journey probably started in about 2014, 2013, and typically with Bitcoin. I think I was very excited to see something being done after 2008 and the financial crisis that happened. I don't think Occupy Wall Street really worked in changing anything. And Bitcoin and the white paper that Satoshi wrote kind of formulated some problems, but most importantly, suggested a solution and a build out of that solution. And I was really excited by that. And then by 2013, 2014, this idea of a shared database had come about through Ethereum. And I was fortunate enough to read Vinay Gupta's article about programmable blockchains. And it was I suppose, changed my life moment, really. I was working working with software teams, trying to build software at scale and, hyperscale, I suppose. And the idea that you didn't need to build out of a database, create all this logic, talk to some other logic to talk back into a database, but there was just one database, struck me as a hugely elegant engineering solution. Through a couple of different problems. One being this massive wealth centralization that was occurring through data platforms. And then secondly, the redistributive ability for, if Gmail's sort of written using a shared database, then, maybe Google can get 80% of the value, but then maybe 20% the user gets back for putting their data and time into the app. I think that's really where my sort of starting premise was. I think also in looking back at those years, it's interesting to see how wrong you are about so many things and what you think is inevitable from when you first encounter an idea to then where it actually lands up. And when I first encountered Bitcoin, people were talking to me about payment systems and how easy and frictionless it is. Now, I don't think you're buying cups of coffee or pizza anymore with Bitcoin. It's seen very much more as a kind of platinum or gold like asset class that you store and keep safe and see its value go up. Similarly with Ethereum, I don't think that the Gmail application or rewriting a social network using Ethereum has made sense yet, but also perhaps fundamentally because the Web 2 sort of software engineering thought and effort that's gone in to make these social networks and make these core tools we use on the internet so compelling, there's no point re-engineering them. And the ability to do so takes a lot of effort and time, and people are interested in other problems. And where we end up, and where we see Ethereum right now, is this financial fabric for a new digital economy. But I think it will morph into other things as we go along, and so one of the reasons why it's so exciting to be in the space.
I want to just comment. I mean, there's so much that you said there. But you're the first time I've ever heard anyone connect Occupy Wall Street with digital currency, and I think there
really?
is. Yeah. It's a great and beautiful connection. I mean, I was in New York City during that time. There's a place called Zuccotti Park downtown, and people had camped out there for months and months and months. And there was this feeling of like like the Vietnam War protests or something like that. That there was a social movement going on, and then it kind of got shut down, and everybody sort of that whole thing disappeared. But the idea of Bitcoin and digital currency sort of having their roots in that same time period. Well, I mean, we know it's connected to the 2008 financial crisis, but the Occupy Wall Street and digital currency connection, I'd never heard that before. So I like that. You mentioned Gmail and the data sharing. The kind of my beef with Gmail, and it's like literally happening right now, is that there's no cost. Since there's no cost, well, there is a cost, but the economic incentives don't seem quite right, because the cost is A, we get spammed, and B, our information is used by Google and other tech companies to do other things like marketing and things like that. And as a user, you don't really like either of those costs. And one of the things that kind of intrigues me, these possibilities of apps that can be built, might have to do with things like having a little micro payment somewhere inside of an app, which would be very, very small, but would cut down, like where someone could send out 1 million emails for free. Now, if it costs them even a tenth of a penny, now to send out 1 million emails could cost them, maybe $1,000, and they might not send out as much spam. Any thoughts on that aspect of this world that we're entering?
I think it is really interesting to see the stuff that flies and takes mass adoption, and the economics play in a mixed soup with the user experience. And so there was a decentralized option on data storage, right, that came about. Forget Gmail. I don't think Gmail will get replaced at all. I think Gmail ends up being like water and electricity. It's a core utility. And the thing that's interesting about that is that it certainly isn't right now, from a financial perspective, treated in that way. It's the wealth creation opportunity of Gmail is massively centralized. But you can't entirely blame Gmail or Alphabet for that. I think that's a combination of law of unintended consequences and thinking really hard and working really hard about a great user experience. And again, when Google came about, the idea of giving your very best product away for free, because there'd be this back end opportunity to monetize on data, that was an innovation. Now we see it as a cancer, but at the time it was a real innovation. And so I think that we have to perceive Web3 as being more about an evolution and what we're going to build, rather than moaning about what we have right now. And I'm not suggesting you're moaning about it, but I think that this idea that you can change the economic model a little bit, make the user experience maybe a little bit less than Google, but it's because there's some kind of purity to it, you will see adoption. I just don't think that's the case. And because it's a commodity, because it's like water and electricity, no one cares. They just want to turn the light switch on, right? I think it's a bit like that.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that, and I think there are certain models that are trying to push the purity of approach and kind of like using that as their sales pitch. And there is a niche adoption of people who are aware of the pernicious tentacles of the big data, or who are incredibly security minded, that kind of like that do adopt those products, but in my perception, and so far, it has never um, gone beyond that user base. But I wanted to go back to the story that you described of kind of like your overarching progression through the last 15 years of cryptocurrency, and you did it from a very theoretical perspective, but actually, like, I know you, we're good friends. I know that you're knees deep in a very technical and personal and experiential manner in all things Ethereum and blockchain. And so I wanted to like dig a little bit deeper into the kind of like the nuts and bolts of your progression. It's not just something that's like a great idea that you've done a lot of reading about and you're excited about the potentials. You've actually like really got involved and had some interesting experiences in the crypto and particularly the Ethereum and solo staking space. So
Yeah.
like, can you give us
Well,
some of that?
yeah, for sure. And I think actually to turn that lens on my own medicine, Launch Nodes as a business focuses on trying to get people to solo stake themselves. We have found ourselves in a situation whereby anyone who we're working with in a retail context is kind of a HNI, in so much as you've got 32 Ethereum or multiples of it. But our goal was that, rather than you hand back your Ethereum to a platform, the idea is that you get to own some of that wealth independently that would normally be aggregated into a platform by being a solo staker. And so I wanted to do it myself with my own Ethereum. That's the simple point in terms of the textured bit. When I understood that Ethereum was going to become a proof of stake network, I didn't do proof of work mining. I couldn't afford to, and I didn't have the flexibility to. But
Couldn't afford to from what perspective?
well, I think I couldn't afford to. I had young children actually from 2012. I had a lot of young kids, and not a lot of young kids. I only had one, but it felt like a lot of time. and as any parent will tell you, and then in 2015 I had my second. But the point is that I didn't feel I had the headspace to do the proof of work model. And perhaps that was a mistake, but that was definitely there. And also I didn't feel it was the elegance of proof of stake, right? That's what I was really there for. And so accumulating Ethereum to be part of that and see how that grew was really part of it. And the business we built is about what I wanted to do myself. And going back to that user experience in terms of when it's so good, it's just impossible for people to move. I think solo staking right now has a poverty of user experience in so much as it's really hard. There's a command line interface. You've got to, do all these things. And I think that what our goal next in terms of, trying to solve for solo staking is creating a user interface that still means it's your node on your infrastructure and you're running that user interface on your infrastructure. You're not accessing someone else's platform. But it does give you kind of like a wizard in very old money, so sort of setting up your PC or Xbox 4 or your iPhone, and even older money, maybe, sort of setting up Windows 95. It takes 20 minutes or so. I mean, it took a lot longer than 20 minutes, but you're there and you're completely in control, and you don't need any, expertise from an engineering team. So we have to find, for solo staking, that user interface that feels like Gmail. That's one of our objectives.
And
I don't know if
that's
that gives you
interesting
the
that you,
textured. If that gives you the
yeah,
texture that you wanted.
no, it definitely does. It definitely does, and it's interesting that you speak about the user interface and kind of where you see yourself and your business at this point, because Albert and I have discussed previously about the kind of like what it takes to be a solo staker, and you sold me on the dream. Like, you are the reason that I am a solo staker. And you gave me the kind of the idealistic pitch about everything that you've just said, essentially, about being part of the fabric, being part of the furniture, and having that stake in the ecosystem, in the environment moving forwards. And I have to be honest, I didn't realize the level of maintenance that would be needed for me to be a successful solo staker. Easy enough to be a passive one and an unsuccessful one,
Yeah.
but a little bit more time consuming to be a successful solo staker. So, like, from a personal perspective, I would be very grateful for an enhanced user interface. But
No,
I
and
digress.
no, I think that's super relevant, and I think that it is about this. Our success is about taking the technical hurdle rate down, and for people not to have to worry about knowing the difference between a cloud formation templates and a Kubernetes config file, and EC2 instances, and that sort of stuff. That isn't mass part. Gmail doesn't ask that of you, does it?
Mhm.
And if we wear a bracelet that says what would Gmail do, that perhaps should be be our engineering mantra. But I think it would be a lie to say that right now the journey you've taken is easy for others to follow, and the same with Albert. And again, we were talking about Albert's engineering past before we joined the call. It's in part because of that engineering past that you sort of are willing to take move in this direction. Is it worth it? Yeah, it's really worth it. And the forces of centralization and the forces of the user experience. And again, I'd say this forces as though it's some kind of conspiracy. It's not. It's just how we consume as humans digital patterns. Lido is fantastic. Why? Because unlike the three of us, if you only have 0.32 Ethereum, you can participate in stake, and that's brilliant.
Mhm.
But the efficacy of that user experience has created just a huge draw into that form of staking, which fundamentally weakens Ethereum if there aren't people doing what we're all doing. And on top of which, I think the critical bit that is so important in solo staking, I think this is why this podcast is so useful, is the network's not static, right? It's not about 4%, 6%, 8%. It's about a whole new set of services that are going to be built on top of the Ethereum consensus layer, right, and the beacon chain. And this staked capital, what it represents and what it can be, and as Ethereum grows, like a general purpose technology like the internet does, so it starts being real and meaningful in everyone's day-to-day lives, the idea that the node operators and the validators and solo stakers are supporting that growth and earning from it. It's not a financial investment. When you were a solo staker, you were doing the work of updating everyone's copy of the database and securing transactions. And for doing that work, you get paid. And I think that work is going to be fundamentally very, very important. And it will be only those who are solo staking or approximations as close to it as possible that can support that ecosystem growing and then also earn from it ultimately.
Jaydeep, I want to go back to a couple of things. First of all, when you said you had a child and you felt you had many children, I can totally relate to that, being a father myself. And I'm in a household with grandchildren, and I just had to blank out my screen and move locations because, yeah, 1 3-year-old can seem like a handful, and they are. I wanted to just for like on the human side, when you set up your first node, I know when I did, there is this moment when you have to sort of basically press a button and send your 32 ETH to the contract. And it's almost like no matter, there's a certain leap of faith that I felt when I did that. And I wonder if that's something that like just, on that human side of, because yeah, when we send an email, maybe the worst thing we do is send a bad email to the wrong person or something, but we don't have money on the line, so to speak, as we do.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I absolutely agree. I had that same fear, and the whole paradigm's new, right? Like, what are we doing here? Are we running software? Are we doing an investment activity? Like, what is going on? Like, this whole thing's a bit mental. And I remember sending Bitcoin in 2013 with the green screen and it was terrifying. And so like the Ethereum deposit contract seems like an evolution from there, but not by a huge amount. It's terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. And what are you doing at different points? You're like, so what am I updating everyone's copy of the database? Who's paying me? When are they paying me? How frequently? Why are they paying me? What if someone else, wants to get paid? Like, these questions are extremely sort of simple in some ways, but then, going back down the rabbit hole to answer them and feel comfortable that you really understand it, and then you understand it at one level, but then you understand it from your actual node and like what it's doing and what it's connecting to and all this stuff. I think there's a lot going on there for sure. So it's terrifying.
And I will add to that in the sense of, like, I am a solo staker. I have one node, so I'm lucky enough that I have enough sufficient finances to fund one node. But I also have children. I have a spouse. We have to, be aware of how much money we have. And so when posing, like, oh, I think we should set up this node, it's going to cost us this much money, and then
Yeah.
spouse is saying, oh, well, like, how does it work? Is it a good
Yeah.
idea? Like,
Yeah.
and like, I don't understand the questions myself.
No, exactly.
I kind of have a handle on it, but then I have to persuade and answer those questions to somebody
No, for
else.
sure.
It's an
My
interesting
wife,
process to go through.
yeah. My wife, or as is affectionately referred to by me and the children as management, is perpetually referred to, my endeavor in crypto and as magic beans. She's like, he's getting so excited about these magic beans. Like, I don't know, whatever they are, whatever they're doing, keeps looking at these screens. I don't know what, it's all meaningless. But yeah, I think that's and actually I'm sort of if I'm in a public forum, I should be telling everyone how fantastic solo staking is, which it is, and how getting the user hurdle, or getting over the technical hurdle, is something that you should do. I think fundamentally, in some ways, it's a story that we're going to see. Businesses are going to want to build that IP into their operations as they leverage staking into building their own products and services. I think the idea that it stays at one layer of, like, you run your node and you either have a node or you've got liquid staking or you've got a node on a platform as a staking as a service provider. I think there's going to be much more sophisticated service offering than that. And there are banks that are offering, staking right now, I think, firms like Revolut and stuff. And I think that mainstream banks will come to it, and mainstream financial institutions will come to it. And as new liquidity and new businesses come in, the idea that all things Ethereum have to be all new, all decentralized, and all kind of protocol based isn't true. Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of New York Mellon, these companies know a lot about money and financial engineering and products. And the idea that they're exclusively bad actors who need to be, rejected from the ecosystem wholesale, I think is a bit silly and a bit naive. And it's certainly not what we share. We actively encourage them coming in, because I think that they will, bring different perspectives, products, services, and ultimately allow mass participation.
That's awesome. I want to just jump in with. I had to do a convincing job with my spouse, and it kind of boiled down for me. I said, well, okay, because she was saying they're gonna take all your money. You're gonna get ripped off. Then I was doing this late night trading, and she's saying you're obsessed with it, because I was doing things on the phone late at night. My bottom line, I said, listen, you can try to talk me out of this, but what if this is like this golden once in a lifetime opportunity? Do you want to be the person that talked me out of that? And that kind of was the one where we kind of moved past that conversation, but it is a real conversation that people want to have.
I just want to reiterate what Jaydeep says in the sense of it's great. I'm happy I did it. I was nervous before I did it.
Yeah.
But like it's all worked out, and I'm very happily a member of the solo staking community. So like, yeah, we're completely happy that I had those conversations, that I ran it by the significant other, but that we have ended up where we are.
Yeah.
Good. That's glad to hear.
With regards to banking, there's two ways I view it. Eliminating middlemen, which is part of what blockchain can do, because it has this trust factor kind of built in. To me, if I'm a CEO of a bank, that would be kind of intriguing, because that's just sort of like, could we, we could be more efficient. We don't need as many people if we have algorithms that are providing trust, as opposed to many, many layers of people and a bureaucracy, which is kind of what the traditional bank model kind of relies upon in that regard. So I wonder, what maybe some of your thoughts on, or can we talk a little bit about this topic of trust and how this plays into what blockchains do in a certain way? Or is that that may be, to me, it's something that I hear talked about a lot, but it's in some ways, trust is a very abstract concept of, we all know what it is, and we use trust all the time, but it's also something that we're not normally talking about all the time, but it is kind of integral to Ethereum and blockchains. The idea that, that was right what Satoshi said. Like we'll put it this way: I send you $1, I give you $1, you get the dollar. I don't have the dollar anymore. I don't know. We had to trust each other too much. I guess we have to trust that when I give you the $1, you give me something in return, and then you won't knock me over the head or something like that.
No, I think it's an inherently accurate point about one. Satoshi's question was, well, how does that get recorded? And the idea that it's recorded on a database that we all have a copy of, that you can own 0.01 Bitcoin and Tommy can own 1 million of them, but both of you have the transaction history of every Bitcoin transaction that's ever occurred, was the core innovation. And I think it came about because of the fact that in 2008 we started understanding that money was political. Like money was not observed or observed physical principles, like physics and like much of the economics, the maths of economics indicates that it's some kind of science. It's not. It's sort of complex storytelling with maths, and I think 2008 really revealed that somehow, oh wow, you could print all this money and bail out the banks, but if you sell sausage rolls and your sausage roll shop is bankrupt, you don't tend to be able to print money, and Hank Paulson doesn't get called in. So this exposure of understanding how the system works, forget getting super agitated about whether you like banks or don't like banks or Hank Paulson or not. Just the idea that we all for the first time understood all this stuff about credit crunches and repo markets and money markets. And I think that blockchains and the trust piece becomes really interesting in a world whereby you are seeing things get very political. And the idea now that crypto plays a middleman in itself of saying, actually, let's not try and hold too much alliance to a fiat currency exclusively, because that's a really political choice, whether I'm in renminbi, whether I'm in dollars, whether I'm in reals, or whether I'm in rubles. But actually, I want to stay above that, and I want to transact above that. I think is going to become more. That's the question of how we navigate that is a question of our times, isn't it? Really. And I don't think I'm convinced that it's one thing or the other. I think it's a new question for our time and this new techno-moneyed space that we're living in.
I think that's actually really interesting and something that I've not thought about too much, and I wonder if I can like use that as a segue to talk about some of the other use cases, because like I like using the word ecosystem when it comes to Ethereum and when it comes to cryptocurrency, because as you've said so many times already in the last half hour, is talking about growth, right, and change, and it's not static. And so like as an ecosystem, there are always new things emerging, and what I want to get to is like the different use cases, because I think when people talk about cryptocurrency, blockchain obviously primarily as the first mover, but that people are thinking about money, and they're thinking about investments, and they're either thinking about it as a way of making more money for themselves, or they're thinking about it as like, is it a potential payment mechanism? But like I want to dig into some of the other things that cryptocurrency is doing, can do, and I know it's something that you're involved with. So like I wanted to delve into impact staking. Maybe you can like tell us kind of like what it is, how it works, what your involvement with it is, as a kind of like as a explanation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, impact staking's as much us as solo staking is. I think they're part of our DNA. It's what we do. And simply put, what is solo staking? What is staking? You take a fixed pool of capital and you generate an interest rate in perpetuity based on a growing network needing this validator and this fixed pool of capital to do this work that it keeps getting paid for. Well, in my head, from an analogy perspective, that constitutes a money pipe. Now, the money pipe might one day have a really fast flow if the price of Ethereum is high and the network's busy and lots of transactions need working. Some days the money pipe might have a lower flow, but what the money pipe always has is a flow of funds coming to it. And so the question became, what problem can you connect this money pipe to finance long-term social outcomes that are positive, right? We live in a world whereby we have some real challenges, and you can take your pick. You don't need to pick, as the ones that we're particularly interested in, which is inequality and trying to support and fund research into direct cash transfers, climate change, and connecting people to the internet who don't have that, and particularly schools. And so we, shortly after we founded, we were lucky enough to be the implementation partner in a project with UNICEF and the Ethereum Foundation and the government of Rwanda, which is relatively well publicized, about using a node in a solo staking capacity and using the returns from that node to pay for internet connectivity in schools. We're doing some really exciting stuff with some other organizations, which hopefully we'll be able to talk about a little bit later. But yeah, that simple bit of like, there's a money pipe, what problem are you going to connect it to for the long term? Because the question also in impact staking is not only, let's give money to charity. There are lots of people doing that. There are lots of methods around that. And there's a vast body of thinking around that. What impact staking is saying is that what problems are particularly suited to this variable money pipe, as in variable flow money pipe. So internet connectivity, the costs are coming down. It's becoming more ubiquitous. And hopefully impact staking is going to see, an increase in what staking returns are. And actually, since we started that project, what I think is really interesting but undesirable ultimately is that Ethereum lost 50% of its value in that time period, right? So the number of schools that could have been connected versus what they are now with the price of Ethereum is something that has to be factored into any model that factors this in. And I think it's all work under progress right now. It's not like a finished thing that you can drive out the parking lot. We're working on what are the right causes to kind of fund with this that can handle that variability in funds. What's the governance model? What's the level of open sourceness that needs to be done? And crucially, internet connectivity is also great because you can pay easily for the data that you're coming back from the the internet connection you're getting, ping time, circuit availability, the geography of where the circuit is. These are all things that Giga have spent a lot of time thinking about, and so it naturally plays to being funded by by staking. But I think other use cases, we're going to have to do that work. When it comes to planting a virtual forest with, different organizations that are looking to do that, like Freedom, how would you use staking returns to do that? And building out the use cases, open sourcing that data so people can learn and build, and also crucially, impact staking is bigger than us. Like we've sown the seed, but we want everyone in the staking ecosystem to be involved. That's Lido, that's staking as a service provider, that's exchanges. This is not a concept that is that complicated, nor should it be controlled in any way. It should just find 1,000 different experiments to propagate. But yes, we're very excited about it.
Can I do a slightly devil's advocate type of question there? So what would the advantage of using Ethereum as a money pipe mechanism versus something out of traditional finance? Why couldn't somebody just open up a money market account and give or a CD or something like that and give the interest from that to also go towards let's say internet connectivity? What's some of the differences there?
I think the difference is the operational nature of the activity of Ethereum staking. So it's not an investment activity whereby you buy a security and you hope it goes up in value, and then the investment of the dividend, the interest rate or a dividend, you then give away. You're performing an investment activity, and then you're giving away the potential returns from that investment activity. In staking, you're doing some operational work, right? You're committing the capital, which gives you the right to stake. You're doing the work of updating everyone's copy of the database and securing the network. And for doing that operational work, you're paid. So it's like going to McDonald's and giving 50% of your salary, away. And that's the difference from it's operational. It's an operational activity that's very tangible and extremely transparent. So, let's say that you were to take in a particular investment. There's a certain point at which that investment becomes a black box and is like, well, I really trust BlackRock and I think their products have historically given a good yield and I'm making this decision based on faith. Whereas with earning money from staking, you're saying, I'm doing this work. I've put the capital up. I'm making sure my box is running the right software and is configured optimally. And I've made these choices about, using Flashbot's MEV to earn some extra, to do that bit of extra work over time shift. I'm going to use and connect into things like EigenLayer when they come about and alive to earn some more. I'm doing some more overnight shifts, whatever. And from these shifts, I'm going to give some of that money away. So it's and anyone who wants to understand how that money's been generated can really easily do that. And there's very little in that's black box. Whereas investment activity ultimately at some point comes back down to someone else's IP in an investment capacity earning you that return.
Mm-hmm. And I guess from a mechanism point of view, for example, if I was to, or any solo staker was to say, well, I like this idea. I want to send some of my returns to help the connectivity of schools in Rwanda. maybe after a year of doing it, I still retain ownership of my ETH. It's kind of, I redirect the
Right.
returns, and I could always say, well, okay, I did that for 2 years, and now I want to do another project, or maybe I need it for some other personal.
No, I think you've highlighted a point that I really missed. The idea that when you impact stake, you don't give away your principal, you give the staking returns, is a fundamentally different idea. And actually, going back to that, point of we live in political times, I think that there's a real question about, is this a new way to finance very large things? Because actually, instead of a loan to build a port, you could have, 15, 20,000 nodes pointing to that port being built for 3 years. And guess what? You got to hit the port milestones. And that number of nodes can finance the cash flow of a port being built. And what does the governance on that look like? Are you taking out a loan? Are you taking out, what is this obligation of you receiving staking returns for a period of time? How do you define that? How is that governed? And we've been in some early stage thinking with some different academics around that, but I think they're really interesting questions and part of what we have to build.
Hearing you talk has raised a question that I've always had about the impact staking, and it's raised a different and a new question that I hadn't thought of before. And I'll start with the new one because I think it's maybe more interesting, at least for me. I mean, you've been talking a lot about the nodes doing work, right? It's not an investment where it just sits there and does what it does. It's working.
Yeah, it's not trading.
And
yeah, exactly. It's not doing trading activity. Yeah.
Yes, it's working. But part of it working is there's a cost associated with making sure it's working.
Mm-hmm.
In whether that's like a human resources cost or an IT hardware cost or electrical, and so the balance of that cost versus what you get out of it, and who that person is, because the node works, but somebody works to make the node work as well, right? Cool. And so I would imagine that's a consideration that needs to be factored into the architecture of how it's all arranged and set up.
No, it certainly is, and I think that the question that also follows on from that in my head is that, does it become more and more of an embedded, commoditized base layer thing that is being done by everyone to varying different degrees? And then, do you have it's a layered cake, whereas that's layer one and base. And right now it's interesting and exciting and innovative and whatever. But, by the time this podcast is 10 years old, it'll be like, do you remember when we used to talk about staking as though it was like, some kind of like sending an email? I think there's an inevitability in my in my head about how we saw what Web 2, that journey. Some of those journeys are about the inherent nature of digital systems. They're not anything. When Web 3 and blockchain and Ethereum isn't going to see anything different. It's going to see those same patterns emerge. And I think it's still out whether in 1996, data center companies and the companies that sold bandwidth were treated as being part of the internet economy. By 2006, or even by 2004, it was very clear that the application builders firms were the ones who were going to take all this money. No one cares about bandwidth companies anymore. And so within the Web3 stack and within the Ethereum stack, where does it sit? It's really interesting. And within staking as well, is that, can you have 100 Lidos, which is what's being kind of talked about now in terms of, there are loads of different liquid staking providers. Or actually, is there some real inherent first mover advantage? And again, we're talking the solo staking podcast. We're talking so much about Lido, but I think it makes sense. They're the monster in the room. They're a protocol, right? If you want to send them a letter, it's not like writing to Coca-Cola, or Blockdaemon for that matter, or Coinbase. They're a protocol, permissionless protocol governed by a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And so all of these new concepts mean that, I suppose the real answer to your question is, I have no idea. But I think I no idea how it ends up stacking up.
Well,
let me jump in there. I want to. This is going off on a tangent, but it's something that me and Albert have talked about before. When you say that Lido is a protocol, like I don't really know what you mean when you say that, and I would love for you to kind of explain to me in layman's terms what that really means.
Yeah, for sure. It's actually really simple. Is that it's a smart contract. It's software that's been written to smart contracts that are deployed on the Ethereum blockchain, and then the user interface you do when you say I've got 0.2 Ethereum and I want to stake it on Lido is a user interface that interacts with those smart contracts and invokes them. And the Lido protocol as a treasury gets paid every time its smart contracts are used. And the network, Ethereum, has to process those smart contracts and make them work. And so it charges a fee. And so it's part of that growth of the network. The more usage, it's like Gmail coming online or Facebook coming online. Now all of a sudden the internet's even more busy, right? In the same way, Lido is a protocol that uses Ethereum and works to support it at its base layer. But it's when someone says it's a protocol and it's permissionless, it means that the business, the logic of it has been written in smart contracts, and those smart contracts run on the blockchain. And then you have a user interface into those smart contracts. And that's how it works. And what's really amazing about that is how efficient it is to build things in that way, in terms of the amount of code you have to write, and compared to trying to do another Google, right?
But at the very top of the tree, Mr. Lido is still sat there going, "Oh, he, let me count all my money," because there's so many Lido nodes that are generating those, like what you were talking about.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I'll let's go before I'm become this Lido love fest. When I first understood proof of stake, and if you remember back in 2019, 2020, it was Rocket Pool that looked like they had a model that was going to allow mass participation with less than 32 ETH, right? That's certainly how I saw it, right? And when Lido came along, I was like, are you out of your mind? Who is going to give like a clean, pure ETH and get some kind of shitcoin for it that says staked ETH or whatever? Like, that's crazy. That's never going to work. Again, lessons in being wrong. And again, they created a deep pool of liquidity. They had, people who really understood and had an incredible vision for this, and they put that liquidity there. And so, yeah, it works, and it's a super compelling user experience. It's almost parasitical now, and it's almost, I think, become too effective for its own good. And there needs to be some redress. And people, again, coming back to the Occupy Wall Street bit, I'm not a big for moaning. You got to build, right? You got to build something that competes and provides a service to people that's useful, that means that they can participate as well. So I think that's the job of the ecosystem as you define it to do.
I think it's an example also of the power of code, and in particular in finance, because it's based, finance is really information, and code deals with information. And so apparently it's possible to write, and that's what Ethereum allows, right, is coding into this financial system. And clever people are able to come up with all sorts of things So what we're talking about now is the ability to almost automatically through code put up and I guess take down staking nodes, but it's only up to the imagination of programmers and people that can dream up business cases of what else could be done this way. It's just a fully automated system.
No, agreed. And I think that to Tommy's point about like what does it mean to be a protocol? Let's move on from Lido and talk about Compound, right? Compound's a money market. Now, again, going back to 2008, a money market is something that only a sophisticated financial institution with not even millions, probably billions of dollars can use, right? In that I've got a short-term need to borrow, X $100 million. I've got a surplus for 12 hours of X billion dollars, and it all matches out, right? Now you can do it with $50 or $500 million using the Compound protocol. And it's taken innovation that was available only to super sophisticated investors and institutions and democratize that. So again, this idea of the protocol and what it means to embed your idea and your business into smart contract logic, and then that logic pays you for the time it's useful. And then when it's not useful, it either morphs and into something else, or it goes away, or it becomes this new bit of infrastructure in a permissionless, decentralized, blockchain. And I don't think that's necessarily understood, because it actually completely challenges the idea of a business in its own right, like, and the away day and the T-shirt, right? When all you're writing is smart contracts, and you're like, yeah, and when it stops being useful, stop getting paid, and we'll move on, right? You're like, wow, okay, I get it. So, and everyone's getting paid in a DAO structure for doing particular chunks of work and whatever, and it's a totally new formulation, really. So I shouldn't be saying that it's just smart contracts, what a protocol is. The whole new sort of different model of what a business and like a collective endeavor of a group of people coming to try and build something looks like.
I'm having almost like an aha moment here. Way back in the day, I used to write code for automating different things, mostly in spreadsheets, but I was a whiz at that. I could write some really mean VB macro code, and it would do stuff. And I used to think, it would be great if I could just get paid each time this code runs. And I think that's kind of what a smart contract in some ways is sort of.
Exactly.
It's like a very specific thing, and when it's used, the creators of it get something. Is that?
No, it's true.
Yeah.
And I think again, going back to the real world and why I'm excited and terrified in the work of what we're doing is we've got to get people participating, right? The asymmetry in knowledge around this is a problem, and I think it's great. This podcast hopefully helps to some extent to share some of these ideas. But if it only sits in the hands of a very few, that's not great, right?
And you actually read my mind, Jaydeep. That's exactly where I was wanting to go. We, the three of us in this conversation, we're all solo stakers. We're in the solo staking world. We're happy to be here. And we understand the role that we play in the decentralized ecosystem, right? And how crucial it is that it's decentralized. And so we have these monsters in the room, and we want to have more of us, right? We want to have more pussycats in the room. How do we incentivize and market the not just your services, but this way of being in the ecosystem? How do we evangelize? How do we get it out there that, like, come on in, the water's fine?
I think bizarrely, it's not what you might think, because you think it's some kind of sort of kumbaya campfires. I think it's small business. I think that's perhaps the answer, is that for you, after a few years of doing this, go, actually, you know what, like, I know enough about this, and I'd want my family and close friends to have exposure to this. I don't want to, run a fund or whatever, but we'll have a consultancy contract, and I'll take their Ethereum and however much they can afford and aggregate it. And we see different crypto businesses that are performing, that are small, that want to use staking as a base layer, but they want a solo stake, right? They don't want to give it to another platform. They don't want to give it to Lido. They want to be part of the core network and have innovations that they can upsell and create. And I think that's what it is. I think it's small businesses that want to be build and want to innovate and have their own trusted relationships with capital that will deploy to them. And it's that muscle that I think that builds. And then again, which isn't sort of as folksy, but I think Citibank, Goldman Sachs won't stay out of this forever, whilst there's a 9% yield on solo staking, right? It's likely they're going to want to come in, and they've got useful value to contribute and partake.
And when they do enter, and they enter, as you were saying, like funding the construction of ports with 20,000 nodes, can we call them lone stakers? Can we call them solo stakers?
Yeah, I think it comes back down to this point about the non-static nature of the network. Maybe none of us will be able to call ourselves solo stakers in 4 years' time, right? And maybe Goldman Sachs will write their own client software. I mean, they wrote their own version of Java, right? It's called Slang. So maybe they'll build their own Ethereum client. Maybe that, and so the idea that there's a grand unified theory of everything that you can, here's the deck. This is what it looks like. My conviction in that, it was certainly my ability to write that deck is gone, but I'm sure there are others who would still love to give it a go. But I'm totally out on that. So I think it is a case of just staying on the surfboard, really, to some extent. But small businesses definitely end up being a route that we're tangibly seeing, who want to participate as solo stakers and want to do it with, starting off with 50, 100 nodes, and then build that out as they build their businesses. I think that's something we see.
Well, that is fascinating in so many different ways, and I don't know if we want to go much longer. Maybe you want to touch on this newfangled thing that has come down the pike, that Tommy alluded to at the very beginning. Not too deep, because I think we might lose some of our. It'll go over my head very quickly. I listened to a different podcast on this topic, like I did my final exam in engineering school, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. But this idea of just utilizing the network and the resources and the computers and the built-in trust and doing other things with it.
Plug-in layer.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, happy to. It's 9 o'clock at night where I am, so there's a natural curtail in my ability to talk about extracted pools of capital. But basically, as solo stakers, it's a real meaningful opportunity for you to make a lot more money than someone else who's staking in another way. And the basic principle of that is that these other blockchains that have tried to recreate validator software and coins and ICOs that then incentivize. Remember, why have you got coins for Ethereum? It's to incentivize the database being shared, right? Like everyone having a copy of it and keeping it in sync requires incentivization. And so the idea that Ethereum's done this great job of incentivizing everyone and has got whatever, I think, $50 billion, $60 billion of Ethereum stake, that pool of capital and that trust would be leveraged by other people who want to build blockchains, who now don't have to worry about the validators and the coins. And they can just focus on that, that chain's utility, and issue an ERC token on the back of it. And then that feeds back into, Ethereum. or even potentially, a different coin to incentivize its use. But that then means now, as a solo staker, you're like, oh, I'll offer my capital through EigenLayer, which is the protocol, rather than it being kind of ad hoc. Through EigenLayer, I'll offer it to other chains, and those other chains will pay me in those coins. And if those chains are useful, and now all they have to do to be useful is just focus on the utility, not any of this validator logic and code and capital, it gives them a much better fighting chance. But it creates a sort of massive earning opportunity for those solo stakers.
Wow.
We outsource our trust and our work to another layer, and they outsource the work that we do to us. So it's like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, that's it. And all of a sudden, they've got the ability to say, actually, I've got all these people doing this work and securing my network and the utility of our blockchain. And if you look at the quality of the software on other chains, and we work with all of them, and you look at the level of centralization of how those chains run, it's just there's no need. There's no need, and it's a great invention. It's not without its controversies, and I try and avoid reading too much of the what I don't want to call it other than gods of our tribe in terms of those people who founded the chains and Vitalik, etc. But I think there's some obvious questions I've got about it in terms of how it works, and we'll see how it works. But is the idea inherently interesting and incentivize again this decentralization? Because again, EigenLayer has been clever in that they want to capture and support Lido stakers and Rocket Pool stakers, but those people will inherently earn less than a native staker, right? So yeah, look, it's an interesting idea, and again, it's a non-static network, right? There's and then the next question becomes is, well, why don't you have unlike EigenLayer squared, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take EigenLayer.
How many layers deep do you want to go down?
Right. Yeah, and then you give them like, how many CDOs squared do you want to go, right? I think we got to CDO cube before the entire financial world melted down and Lehman Brothers collapsed. But yeah, I've talked about it in a blog post multiple times that even with Ethereum, it's financial engineering, a lot of it, and that financial engineering has some super positive aspects, namely that you and I can get an interest rate by doing this work without a bank and an intermediary. We could have access with $50 to money market functionality that 15 years ago was never available without $50 billion. Super positive innovations, but it also comes with the idea that these are regulated, that people can, be defrauded easily, and the next question is, what actual practical utility is it serving in the real world to real people in meat space, right? You can't keep engineering your way to returns that no one can understand and that are completely abstracted and that don't improve and make meaningful living on Earth, breathing oxygen, wanting to have children, dogs, cats.
So there's got to be some real world utility.
Yeah,
people are finding in there for sure. Yeah, because if they can't find it, then it's not going to have value, and then something else will get invented in its place. Clearly, a solo staker is someone who somewhere in their bones says, this is meaningful, this has value. I mean, maybe we were convinced and hyped into something, but I feel personally that it's a lot deeper than that. It's just sort of understanding how the world works over a lifetime and saying, wow, this is something new, different, and I can understand why it would be valuable. And so I'm still bullish about Ethereum and staking, and that new things come up. But of course, they do have to have a real world value connected with them.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I look forward to listening to other guests on your podcast with their perspectives, because I think, mine's one. We've gone relatively far and wide. But for you guys, one of the things that I'd be really interested in asking is that as solo stakers, in very much the, doing the minority sport, what are you most excited about as solo stakers? In the next 12 months, let's say.
I'll take one on that. I mean, well, from staking point of view, I like, it is kind of minimal amount of effort. Returns come in every once in a while. You get a sort of a little boost of income that is very nice, and it's a learning. Like in order to understand this, I felt like I had to have some skin in the game. And so, I just find it fascinating from an intellectual point of view, also just to sort of pay attention and be.
So by the boost, Albert, do you mean you as in getting an execution layer return?
Yes, something called an execution layer return, right?
And then, Tommy, does life feel different now? It's not just pretend money on a validator node, but it's real money coming into a wallet. Like what's your collective?
Well, it's interesting actually, because when you asked that question, I went into my brain and I was like, oh my, how do I answer that question? And it's interesting because one of my realizations, I think it was today, it was in the last couple of days, is that since the upgrade whereby withdrawals are happening and my MetaMask wallet is getting a little deposit every 4 days, I realized I've stopped looking at what the value of Ethereum is, and all I care about is my validator node running. Because as long as it's running, I know that every few days I'm going to get that little parachute payment. And I just I don't really care what the value of Ethereum is on a day-to-day basis. Of course, in the long term, I want it in 10 years' time. I want it to be worth 50,000. But whether today or tomorrow it's 16 or 18 or 20, and I've stopped looking at it. And so I think that's what excites me over the next 12 months. I've mentioned this to Albert previously. One of the big things that excited me was this idea of you set it up and then it just does its thing.
Use money, yeah.
It's needed more maintenance than I thought when I very first went into it, but it's still, there's a level of you set and you forget and it just does its thing, and I like that. But now with the withdrawals, that's I find that exciting. And I tell you, one of the things that I'm, I guess, not scared of, but somewhat anticipating is that now that I'm getting these parachute payments, I've got to figure out what I do with this stuff, because it's not having a node is easy, right? You've got 32 there and it just does its thing. But I'm very, very slowly accruing a little bit more and a little bit more that's not on the node. And now I've got to decide what to do with it. And I don't know what to do with it. And I'm too lazy and busy with other things to put the effort into making that decision. But I guess that's something to look forward to.
Buy me a margarita next time you see if you're looking at things to do. That's put that on the to-do list for sure.
Okay, you're on.
Oh, sure. This has been a fascinating discussion with someone who is really a leader in the solo staking space, Jaydeep Korde. And so really grateful. Thank you so much, Jaydeep, for sharing your insights with us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jaydeep. Always a pleasure. Yeah, take care.
Cheers, fellas.
Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate you sharing our crypto journey. Please send us a message via thelonestakers@gmail.com and make sure to subscribe, follow, and mash that bell button so you never miss an episode. The Lone Stakers Podcast. Everywhere you find podcasts.
This has been a Drop Tent Media production.